Hi, guys. This is part 2 of episode 1 of Sparring Time.
Sparring time can bring your friends with sticks and blades and empty hands. Let's learn and have some fun. It's sparring time.
All right, then we're back. All right, so our next question is difference between, fighting with weapons, without weapons, or, or sparring without them. What's the difference there? And that also leads us to rules and what equipment we use when we're fighting without weapons. And last thing, if you guys know any sparring events or any other events that help you learn and promote those
Can I
kinds of events.
can I go first because I feel like I'm cheating by letting Shawn go first. So I was gonna say
Yeah,
I'll
no
answer
problem.
first, but
No problem. You can go
I
first.
think the real big difference is that if we were really fighting, these fights could be over super fast because we're talking about weapons, and it's like you can't actually spar with sharps because it's not safe. And then with uh, now, is there training you can do with sharps that's also non-compliant? There actually is traditional stuff, but it's like then you titrate it with speed and other stuff. Uh, and there's a level of non-compliance. There's a lot of agreement to make it actually work. But I think that's the big difference. Is like, oh, with judo, it's isolated that we're only using the safe techniques. They took out the unsafe techniques. With weapons, no, I mean you have to use either safety weapons or safety, mask or something to make it safe, or rule sets were like, oh, we're not going to do this amount of stuff to keep it safe. And what Mark Denny thankfully did is like he opened a lot of people's eyes to, hey, a lot of what we thought was unsafe is actually safe. But when you really develop the skills, then you still have to know it's like, okay, what's opening up? And like going back to one of my the things I touched on is like if you really teach people how to develop hard power to like break coconuts or break bones, then it's like you're gonna have to titrate it with different equipment or different safety sticks. But otherwise, or you gotta the other way is that you titrate it through really knowing your measure and knowing how to move your hands out of the way. That's the other way you keep people safe. So there's like this as you improve one skill, you have to improve another skill to keep it safe. And here's the problem: when you start to throw new people in, unless you have people who have the wherewithal to reduce their intensity for other people, people are going to get jacked up. And I had several students who had been high school champions, and they were doing what they normally did from wrestling, and they grabbed someone who had never experienced it before. And it's like people got, and this happened more than once at different times. It's like, no, I'm just like super careful about it. But it happens with other skills in weapons fighting. I think that's it for me for now, Shawn, about answering the first question.
Yeah, so yeah, that's yeah, the weapons and non-weapons, sharps, meaning bladed weapons, right? Those are completely different from fighting with blunt weapons or no weapons at all, right? So let's pass it over to Sean and see what how he feels about that.
Um, well, first, let me just talk about the thing with sharps. Um, yeah, you can't spar with sharps um, because you'll kill each other. Um, the I did, and just in case my insurer is listening to this, this happened before my current insurance policy and not in my school, and only with a couple of my friends because one of my teachers suggested it. But we would drill with sharps, and yeah, and basically we would just continue drilling with the sharps until someone got cut. and then and then we'd be like, okay, so that was a useful experience. The difference between I'm not sure where the pin is here, so just a heads up there. But the the difference between sparring with weapons and sparring without weapons is that weapons are safer. When you've got your fencing mask and your gloves on, um, even a rattan stick, like when I heard the term live stick, I was like, what? Even the rattan stick is not going to do any real damage most of the time, even full out. In the Dog Brothers, you occasionally have seen a broken bone, um, but by and far, I think the majority of the serious injuries came from the aluminum knife fights. Um, there were some broken bones. I mean, I've had a broken finger myself, um, but like the stick doesn't do nearly as much damage as a punch or a kick. So I would much rather take a full-on hit. And this is assuming you're wearing a fencing mask. Obviously, the head versus rattan, if it's not protected, yeah, the rattan's going to win. But the rest of the body, like unless you hit the bony prominences, um, generally speaking, it doesn't do a lot of damage. It's just welting, and that'll be all healed up in the week. Um, so very, very seldom are you structurally damaged. So my experience in Dog Brothers is actually like I haven't had much in the way of long lasting issues, nor have the people I fought against. But it does happen. Like a cracked rib can happen, or broken arms have happened. Um, but generally speaking, the safety equipment makes all the difference. If you have good safety equipment, you're pretty safe. You're still risking fingers, um, and you're still risking the tip of your shoulder. Um, and of course, if you're going full contact, it can happen. You can get that nice square hit, and the energy transfers and the arm breaks. I definitely know two people that's happened to, interestingly, from each other in subsequent fights. But anyway, um, I think again, the thing about all these things is having a good progression. Elrik said something really important. If you're going to spar with someone with a lot of experience. And this is a rule that we actually have at the throwdown, which is if this is your first throwdown, fight all the guys with the most experience first, because number one, they can control themselves and they're going to be more relaxed than anybody else. So they're not going to like have a knee-jerk response and mess you up. Number two, if you're new to sparring, you're going to do some suicidal shit and they might save you from it. And, because a lot of times, like someone who's new will like have a great idea and they'll walk right into something terrible, just because they don't know it about it yet. And so sparring with someone with much more experience is way better than sparring with someone with equal experience at the beginning. Just a safer plan. Again, assuming that person is not looking to injure people, doesn't have like some sort of an ego issue. But yeah, I'd say one of the other things is progress the sparring appropriately. Like I wouldn't have people walk into open sparring with no parameters, ideally off the top. You could do it if all the safety protocols are in place, but they won't have a very productive experience. Whereas isolated sparring over specific goals, like specific references or specific techniques or specific entries, that can be highly productive early on. So for instance, when we're introducing boxing, sometimes we'll just say jab versus jab, or, we'll have straight punches versus hook punches. Can be a very productive session, rather than just going, okay, punch each other. Because it's like, well, when are these tools useful? And if you have a lot of experience in the coach that's leading the sparring session, then oftentimes they can introduce these isolated sparring options, which just sound like they're arbitrarily choosing, but a lot of these choices will illustrate why you use a tool at a given time. Again, the example of straight punches versus hook punches, that will give you a lot of clarity on why you would use one tool versus the other, and when and how. So what was the sparring rule sets and equipment?
Yeah, so yeah, sparring rules sets, like yeah, because the rule sets and equipment, they go hand in hand. Like rule set would be like
Absolutely.
what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, and stuff like that.
Yeah. This is a thing. We back when we had less conditions at the throwdown, less in our contracts, we actually had um someone suplex someone who didn't know how to land this. And they actually, like, threw them straight up in the air and walked away. And it was like, so fortunately, the guy that got thrown was, he rolled out of it. It was amazing, rolled out of it. But ever after that moment, we're like, okay, you guys got to be really, really clear. If you have skills that the other people don't even know about, you can't just throw them out there. So being clear on the rule set is super important. Uh, but you know, yeah, it's very, very important. And of course, having the right equipment. We had it's been a point of contention at some of the events, because I have one person that wants to fight with the Chinese fans, and 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 I'm like, okay, so you're using these steel fans, and you want to fight someone who's using what? Right? It's like, because if it's steel fan, I mean, are you going against a sword? And if you're going against a sword, do you have the proper gloves? And it's like, well, I can't wear gloves because then I can't manipulate the fan. And I'm like, I don't know how to safely navigate this. it's, it's so this has been a point of contention, because the one person really wants to use the fans, and I'm like, so how do I give you guys equivalent safety? I can't quite figure that out. I'd say both of you should not have gear on. But it's interesting, because sometimes I will choose, like, my students right now will spar with no safety equipment and rattan, um, just to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of fear in place. But at the same time, that starts to necessitate, okay, like, you don't want to hit them in the face, right? You want to be careful about certain things. We're going to have to slow it down a little bit, um, and create, an isolation in the timing. So um, so it really depends. If you curate it well, you can mess with these things a little bit and get good results out of your sparring. Um, but generally speaking, I'd say if everybody's new to the situation, the appropriate gear for the thing that you're doing is extremely important. Yeah. So if you're going to a sparring event, which I think was the part 3 of the question, I think the most important thing to look for in a sparring event is what are their goals, right? If you're looking at a school that's trying to like prove themselves, that's going to be a dangerous sparring event. if if you're going to an event where the people have a lot of experience with sparring and um, they're doing a lot to make sure that the participants are showing each other respect, and a lot of that respect is geared towards safety, I think that you're going to have a good sparring event. You definitely need a strong leadership. um and I'll harken back to Mark Denny, because that speech that he gives at the beginning of every gathering is so crucially important. And when I added something like that was inspired by his speeches to my events, the events became better, and um, so much better, because now instead of people coming in with like objectives that were purely insular, um, or self-oriented, you're looking at that circle of people you're going to be working with, and you're committing to them that you're going to behave in a context that you've all agreed to. And regardless of where you're coming from, you're now part of this circle, even if you don't know each other, even if you're there to like prove yourself, but you're also there to like keep that context. That's going to make for a great event. And so long as you have strong leadership in that, and someone who's going to say, hey, you know, you guys got to stick to your commitments on this when it starts going sideways, it's going to be a good event.
All right, thank you for that, Sean. And yeah, well, one thing I'd like to speak about before I hand it over to Elric would be like I'm a big believer on progression. Like I don't like starting out, especially my students, starting out like full on hard contact, just trying to kill each other, sparring. Yeah, I believe you gotta ease them into it, right? And it doesn't matter what rule set it is, right? You gotta learn the rules first before you can apply the rules. So I think the talks before the event starts or any sparring session, getting clear what your goals are. So there's a lot of prep work and sparring. You can't just show up and like, oh, I'm here to spar and just try to beat someone to death. You know, that's not. I don't think that no one wants that. If you do want that, maybe some events might not be for you, right? So a lot of times with my students, I usually start them off with some sparring games. So I got this game where it's a turn-based game. So you can either step or you can swing. So that's the name of the game: step or swing. So you take turns, no one's getting hurt, right? Because when we're swinging, your only goal is to, if you land a hit, you get a point, and that's it. So there's a bunch of different rule sets out there where it can, tackle the safety side and you can still learn from it. But of course, there's always, every time you add rules, there's always a trade-off, right? Because when you add rules, you add safety part, it's not a fight anymore, right? It could become a drill. It could become, if it's not compliant, it could become sparring, or it could just be a simple game, right? We mentioned play a while ago. We mentioned a lot of great points on sparring today. So I'm going to hand it over to Elric to talk a bit about rule sets you've experienced, you've seen, right? There's events like competitions or just sparring gatherings and whatnot.
Um, I kind of actually want to go back to something else. So, but it ties to this because when my first FMA system was that I went deep into, so it's like, okay, we're deep now, was Kabbalah Scream Serrata. And in a lot of seminar FMA, they have like the 5 count box pattern. Where that came from for a lot of systems in the United States was actually the counter for counter for what Angel called sparring, in Stockton, and the way he came up, that was sparring for them. Because the idea was, oh, if you're really good, you're gonna block and you counter, and if you're really good, you're gonna block, counter, block, counter, and it just turns into flow. And that was kind of the mentality of it. But what wasn't ever explicitly said were all the agreements. Oh, to make it work that way, we're gonna always stay in media range, which for Serrata means, oh, we can't touch their hand. Well, we can't touch their body with the live hand, but with our weapon hand, we can touch their body. So, and we're only going to attack to the body. There were no attacks to the hands. And so that's what made that drill or that type of flow work. I've seen different types of traditional sparring games, and it's like, oh, sometimes it's only going to be hands. Sometimes it's only going to be hand stuff to like, they'll leave the elbow alone, but it'll be here. Or sometimes it'll be going up the shoulder, or maybe it'll all the body. It'll go to first blood, or I mean, these were games that people always said like, oh, real fighting in the Philippines was always with the hardwood heavy sticks. Like, no, different parts of the Philippines had fiesta fights, and they fought with rattan. They fought with no armor, and usually people could do a couple different matches with different people. But sometimes people did get knocked out and they were done for the day. But I mean, I look at the different rule sets from a cultural context, and then like I've been involved with different types of FMA sport, and I mean, you could do an entire talk just on FMA sport, and like, we're friends with people who are coaches on the national team. Your last event, you had, man, there was at least 4, maybe 5 people there who were either current or former national athletes on the national Philippine Army team. And like behind closed doors, it's like I know people who are athletes or coaches who'll be like, this part of our sport sucks, right? But that's what you need to do with the sport, because a good sport should be safe, and then safe, but also for the competitors should be able to go all out. And I'm not going to talk about how I could see that stuff could be improved, because that's not the point. My focus has really been about on like, okay, how can we develop fighting skill? And then inside of that, then the rules are really about, it comes down to the individuals who are coming to play. Then you create the rules for what you want to work on, and you find the right people who want to work on those things with. And like I said, it's like when you really understand your art, then you can deconstruct what do you want to put in, what do you want to take out. And then sometimes we just experiment. Like the first time you and I did steel, all we had on was fencing masks, hockey gloves, and t-shirts. And we thought that was enough because we thought we had enough control, and we did have a lot of control. But then like afterwards, it's like, oh, it actually, when that light stroke of that speed hits the body, it actually leaves a scar. But we only knew that because we tested it, right? So it's like, you have to have good playmates. And I think, we look at like, oh, where we could push the envelope. But like, again, back to safety, and the rule sets on some levels are irrelevant, but also extremely relevant in terms of, are you creating isolations, or like what constraints are you creating to bring out the skill sets that you want to test and see if they really work, or to get more reps in, or to develop. And that's how I look at the different rule sets and everything. And I think I also have to say, it's like some of the best people I ever sparred in the Philippines in terms of like, I want to hit them and not be hit. They honed all of their skill from different types of Philippine sports point sparring. So there's very good stuff there. Some of the best people I met in terms of like being able to dominate and control elbows at the Corto. People always poo-poo doce pares, but I met people who got really good skills to control and dominate you. They developed it because they were doce pares athletes. So I think that people poo-poo on the sports stuff too much, not realizing, oh, there's benefits you can get out of it too. And then also about plenty of sports athletes, even people in the national team, like, yeah, we're not fighters, we're athletes. So this interesting juggling act of all these different types of ways we can play, or spar to focus on fighting.
You really need to, now for safety wise, trust is very important, especially, if it's your first time doing something new or doing something a bit more dangerous than usual, yeah, trust would be great there.
Uh,
And then, yes.
one last thing is like Sean saying the leadership thing. I mean, if you're going to be sending a new person to an event, or if you're in charge of an event and new people come, it's really on you to make sure these people get you contextualize from like, hey, this is a community thing. Take care of each other, grow together, and then watch them to make sure because they might not, they might go, yeah, 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 and then like to beating up, like, oh shit, he's beating this guy up. You gotta be responsible for who you bring into the community when you're doing community events.
Yes, and speaking about the community and rule sets, rule sets, you really got to train for the specific rule sets you're going to be doing, right? Because the training is very different, right? So different communities have preference or different rule sets. So yeah, and let's to wrap up this segment. Any events you guys go to for sparring or anything you want to promote? Now's the time to do that. We'll start off with Shawn.
Um, well, of course, there's the throwdowns that we host on a regular. Um, there are the Dog Brother gatherings, which personally I feel like if you're going to test yourself in a weaponized fight, I think that there's really nothing more approximate to a real fight than that. Um, I think if you're going to do steel, and I haven't done this yet, but I'd like to. I hear Swordfish is probably the premier event to get to. Um, but yeah, really, any sparring event that's well organized is going to yield results. I'm thinking about what Elrik just said about people putting down some of these sports. And I remember our guys used to really have a bad opinion about WeCap. But at the last event that at Elrik's last event that I attended in Manila, I got to toe off with, I might get his name wrong, but Daniel Bernes. Is that right? And, he's a WeCap guy, but he clearly decided to do a safe fight that was more oriented towards hitting without getting hit, and he provided me an awesome fight that day. I have huge respect for him as a result. And you can get skills out of any of the rule sets, really. Just be clear about whether you're playing the rules or you're playing a fight. So those are the events that I know of. I know that like in different places, there's different people running smaller events, but I'd say Dog Brothers and Swordfish would be, good events. And then like MMA events, get out to those and see what you've got, because our throwdown events are any style versus any style. So it's like you'll have Muay Thai going up against Wing Chun, going up against Jiu-Jitsu, going up against, and I think it's really, really good to get out there and see, what your style has provided you against the, random. So.
All right, thank you for that, Sean. Let's move on to Elric. Any events you want to promote
Well,
or share
I'll just
or
talk about like Manila. I mean, first I'm gonna say the ESC, so the Stream of Spar Club. You guys need to organize an event again. So those events were uh, the closest thing to Dog Brothers that existed in Metro Manila because of the intensity and also the skill level of the people who come to fight at those things. But I also really enjoy the events that you've been throwing, Joseph, and like the variety. Like, there's been some times where people put on gloves and doing that, and like more people have been going to the ground. So it's kind of funny. You put down mats this time, and people put on gis, and it's like, what are you guys doing? You're just doing BJJ. Like, add some slaps in, or like, here's some knives, use some knives, you know.
we had some people preparing for a competition, so they requested to do that. So I don't mind it. Help them out a bit.
No, but it's like, it's just my recommendation. The future is like, okay, you know, this is what else, because usually you don't bring a knife into a BJJ class. So it's like, take advantage of this and then you can add the other weapons.
It's frowned
You know,
upon.
I appreciate the events, the point sparring events of Ronnie Royce. And what made his events pretty cool was that he actually used a liquid. He created a liquid chalk paint on his padded swords, so that and also knives, so that when they scored, they'd like stop. And you could just grab someone and look like, yep, there's a scar. That's what I thought it was. But then it was very clear who got the deeper or bigger mark. And then but it was kind of funny because there was always a crew repainting the next weapons because they'd come off after every couple of hits. Ronnie Royce's events. I'm trying to think of what else in Metro Manila that people should seek out. There's different clubs that they can visit that do sparring, but you need to contact those communities. But also, it's like when they have it, the bench sparring and paete. But there's also, like I said, there's the sports stuff, and there's different sport groups that you can contact in Manila and inspire with those folks. There's a lot here. And then same thing for Cebu. You just got to contact those folks.
All right. Thank you for that, Elric and Shawn. So let's move on to our last segment. So our last segment is we're going to be playing a sparring match between Shawn and I, and it'll be interesting to see Elric's and Shawn's takes on this. So let's provide a bit more context to the video before we play it. So yeah, I think the match happened during an event Elric was hosting at Sarah's Park, and yeah, I think Shawn sparred like I don't know how many matches he had there. I think he had like more than 20.
17.
Yeah, like 17 matches, right? So I'm not sure how many he had before mine. Yeah, anything you want to say about the clip before we play it, Shawn?
Only two before you.
All right. So yeah, the clip, yeah, we're sparring with Steel, right? So before that, I think I sparred with one of the guys you came with. You think it was like a Bolognese instructor, something like that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that match. I wish we can play that video as well, but I think he almost broke my pinky before our match. Yeah, so I was trying out a lot of new stuff against him, and a lot of stuff were working, and a lot of stuff weren't. So I heard you two speaking, like about like our match, and yeah, it was interesting to hear what you guys were saying. So yeah, I'd like to see how you guys review sparring footage. Like what do you learn from it just by watching film or and because this is yeah, depends of course again on the rule set, on the equipment and stuff. Because before this match, I don't think we spoke really about what rules we were doing for this match. But of
Yeah,
course,
I guess we didn't.
yeah, we didn't. Yeah, I don't think that's
I
great
think I
practice.
think I was just so excited that someone wanted to like pick up steel with me because there was really only two other people other than you and I that were willing to pick up steel that day. And um, yeah, and I gotta say, just to prelude this, I never put a lot of weight into reviewing videos of fights that I wasn't personally in, because I've found in all the years of watching fights that I've done and all the years of reffing fights that I will have opinions about what people should be doing, and then when I fight the people that I've got strategies for, I find out it's different when you're standing in front of them. So
Yeah, so yeah, we since we didn't speak about, the rules here, so I was trying to figure it out as we were sparring, and I was trying to look back into other spars I did with similar equipment, and so I was like, my match with, for example, with Elric before was when we only wore helmets and gloves. We mostly tried to aim only at the protected parts, but I was not sure what we were doing. So I was a bit cautious there, but all in all, it was a fun match. So I'm gonna play the video, and you guys can talk over it if you want, because I'll try to share the video as well in the separately, so people can view that as well. All right, so I'll play the video now.
Holy crap, we're fast.
Yeah,
See
we don't
that?
speak.
That
Yeah,
was
we don't
really
speak about
exciting.
rules at all.
When I saw you rise up like that in the video in post, that was an exciting moment for me because I could tell that you wanted to drop.
Yeah, I do that a lot to bait, to just see your reaction there, to see what you would do.
Is this our actual speed?
Yeah, that's our actual speed. That's not sped up.
You can tell it's actual speed because of the people speaking. It's headphones. It's clear you guys are trying to hit and not be hit. You're definitely working on your measure. You're looking for what's available, is what I see with the hand shots.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Elrik was watching this event, this match
Oh,
live.
he was. He was off to the left of frame.
That was nice engagement of the weapon of that for that one buck sock, Shawn. Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I was really excited about this match because, um, uh, you know, you're about my height. You're super fast, um, and it's not really safe for me to just reach in. And so yeah, I guess you got lashed on the arm there. But yeah, I wasn't actually concerned about the rule set because I just assumed I just assumed like you were up to um, sparring with the sword because you came in very willing. And we had all the important stuff covered anyway. So, the only thing that we could have possibly injured was the clavicle. Since we had the forearms covered, I really wasn't worried about the incidentals because but then again, like I like those fabric burns that you get from the sword through the t-shirt. It's just like, well,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
weren't you proud of them? Like, aren't you proud of those marks? Like when they happen, and you're like, okay, so I know what happened there. I know how deep that would have gone. So
yeah. So yeah, I'd like to speak about like how that match actually ended because I don't think we spoke about how long we wanted the match to be, rule sets or nothing. We didn't speak about that. And so, yeah, I don't advise people watching at home or people watching this, please don't do this. If it's your first time sparring like this, maybe have someone watching or, safety, basically. Safety first, guys. And then, yeah, basically the match ended because Elrik mentioned that, I got the cut at the end and then we didn't notice. Yeah. So he didn't tell us to stop. We just assumed, no, that meant stop. All right. So yeah, let's play the video actually one more time. And if you guys want me to pause it at a certain spot, or if you guys have comments now before I play it again, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I think pausing it. One thing that the reason why you guys could play like that is that it's like I mean, this is what your second or third time meeting. Like you guys have met before and you played a little bit like with padded and I think synthetics years ago. But it's like me as the because this event was just also sponsored by me. It was sponsored by Kiro because it was in their location and it was like I was responsible to make sure no one was going to get injured. I wasn't concerned about you guys injuring each other because I spar with Joseph a lot and I know Shawn's background and my experience of sparring with Shawn a couple of years before that was like, man, this guy really understands measure, and I was also clear of like how much he kept me safe. Because there's a thing you said. It's like when someone's bigger than you, and especially if you can recognize that they have similar skill set, it's like that bigger size can translate. They can jack you up a lot more. So it's like I trusted you guys to keep each other safe, and I could see that there. But it was like also fun to see you guys little opening up, like y'all didn't hold back in the speed department, in my opinion. Not in the violence or the power department, definitely, especially with steel as what's appropriate. But it's like the speed and the accuracy and aiming was like that's what I saw. But then I'd also say it's like Do you agree with my assessment so far, Shawn and Joseph? Because me looking at it, I could be totally wrong. That's what I see, but I know I could be wrong.
Uh, I definitely don't think we held back in terms of speed. Um, I think we offered quarter when we saw one of us was falling off, or reeling from a cut. Not that that happened much because the protective equipment does it protects pretty absolutely. Um, the and that one cut that happened to the arm, like I don't think it was even noticed. Like, did you have any pain after that fight
No,
at all?
none.
Yeah,
No.
me either. But not to say that you didn't hit me, right? It's like, um, because you definitely got some shots in. Um, for me, looking at the video after the fact is is the more exciting thing because I can see like because we're coming at it from let's call it complementary systems. Like we're not having exactly the same take, but our source material is coming from uh the the similar sources or people that drew from the same source even and so I could see places where you were using certain strategies, but not at the time. At the time, I'm working my strategies. I'm trying my best to prevent you from creating openings in me or creating places where you know where I'm going to be, so that you can hit. Um, but watching the video again, it's fun because there's certain points where I'm like, oh, I know what you're doing there. And I wouldn't have been able to see it from in front of you, but from the side, I can see it. So,
Yeah, so yeah, I don't think I felt much any pain in that match because I think I was still pretty much hurting from the previous match. I felt like my pinky was coming off. So yeah. And then the cut at the end, yeah, that was very shallow cut, and it was just bleeding, and that's why Elrik jumped in because none of us noticed. Yes, and then well, you mentioned speed. I know the friend you brought along as well mentioned speed as well after I fought him, and I felt like I thought you were holding back on speed because I felt like I was holding back on speed as well. So yes,
well, shit.
Elric wants to say something.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because we're watching it and like it looks super fast, but I can totally agree with you in the moment of my own experience. Like I thought I was holding back on the speed. I thought I was going slow. So maybe in your subjective inner worlds, you weren't going full out in terms of speed, but it looks the way it looks, right?
Because
Yeah.
yeah, because of course we're giving each other quarter, trying to stay
Well,
safe and everything.
yeah, you guys are
Yes,
definitely keeping each other safe. One of the things that I'm looking at, and like Shawn hinted at, but I need to say it directly. It's like you both are students of direct students of Tata who spent significant times at different periods in their lives. Um, but the interesting thing for me that I was really looking at with Shawn was as a student of Monromi is like, okay, what happens during the weapon engagement and the timing, and what when we rewatch it, I'm going to be looking for that again. So I was looking for it for the first time, but the couple times when I saw like, oh, cool, I could see how Shawn actually was able to time it, engage, and then control the connection and throw you the way he wanted to throw your weapon. But here's my question for you guys. I would say it looks like, I don't know, 70, maybe 80, 90% of that match could have been done with padded weapons, but yeah, 10% you couldn't have gotten the same thing unless it was steel, or totally disagree with me because maybe the steel provides an entire different space of how you're going to engage. And I see Shawn shaking his head, so please contradict me or share your thoughts, Shawn.
Uh, uh, I don't like padded weapons. Like I, I
Totally
So I
valid.
teach my children with padded weapons, right? And it's good because I don't want them to get discouraged. And so they can do the padded weapon thing and they don't get discouraged and they think it's fun and they're learning basics. And so they're using padded weapons and they're trying to hit the armor. And if there's, something else that happens and something else happens. But when you're doing an actual bladed art and your tolerances are are down to like 15 degrees to each side of center line, how are you going to do that with a cylinder? That's my point. Like,
I,
also,
I agree.
without the fear, how how are you going to behave properly? And by properly, I mean, how are you going to treat it with the mortal threat that it actually is if there isn't any threat of damage? Even with the steel, with the gloves and forearms that we had, with the face mask, and acknowledging the fact that we were only wearing t-shirts, neither of us got hurt at that speed.
Yeah.
Neither of us experienced any pain except for his finger, working with my Bolognese instructor, who I think did hit hard at one point, but generally speaking, we got out of that without any pain. But at least there was the fear of it, right? If it had been padded sticks, I'm not sure that we would have been quite so mentally sharp about what we were doing. And I don't think I could have, with the way they're flexible and the way that a cylinder bounces, I don't think that I could have got any play on the blade engagements that I was looking for.
Well, just and thinking about actors, like how can you build the timing, let alone the timing and accuracy to do the blade engagements unless you're training with steel? Like one of the things as a judoka that I can do it. It's like I just did it at the gathering 2 days ago. I did an ashibarai, which is a foot sweep, and I brought the guy down effortlessly, laid him down. Uh, but against someone of the similar skill to myself, I've never been able to pull it off in competition. Against someone who doesn't know, doing no problem. But I can see like, oh yeah, how are you going to get that timing to get that 15 degrees, to get the right placement of, you're strong to the middle or whatever, unless you're training with steel. You'll never develop that particular skill set. So, I see it now. It's like it's impossible. At least that's what I think now. But I do feel like for others, if they're not working on a sword system that has that, anyway, I think padding's a valid thing. But that's just me.
Yeah, so to give more context to the sparring match you guys watched was this is my second time sparring Shawn. So my first time sparring Shawn was at Elrik's event in UP, University of the Philippines in Quezon City, and all we did was like hand sparring with a padded stick, and no footwork was there's no footwork at all. We're just standing there, and I don't think none of us were happy about how that match went because nothing really happened in that match. So yeah, it was
Too
exciting
safe and
to
boring.
it was exciting to have this match because you can even tell by the people even holding the camera or the people behind the camera how they were like taken aback a bit, and a lot of them haven't seen that type of sparring at that pace. So yeah, it was great event, Elric. Thank you for hosting that with Kiro, and it was great to spar with you. I'd like to count this as our first time. That was their first time sparring because I don't like to count the other one because that was the noodle
That
padded
that first time
thing.
was play.
Yeah, that was play. Yeah,
Play is valid in the
yeah,
right context.
yeah. So yeah, I tend to be like to speak about more about sparring. The way I spar, I like to be more playful than a lot of people I spar with. So sometimes people take offense to that. Sometimes people are, you know, fine with that. But yeah, overall, yeah, speaking about the match we had, Shawn, yeah, that was really enjoyed that fight. Really saw the love the new stuff you were working on because I know when the first time we met, you weren't doing you weren't studying KI under Mongromi, so I really saw some of the binding work you're trying to work on and the other stuff. Because before I've seen you fight in person was at times you was here you're just coming in with the block and trying to land your hook in. And this time I really see you're trying to do something else. So yeah, it was really fun to see how different you were sparring now compared to before.
Yeah, my dog brother's fighting is a lot different from my sword fighting. So I think they're night and day. Percussion versus cutting, it's a very different thing. Yeah.
Yes, so yeah, context really matters in sparring, especially watching it and reviewing it. So yeah, I'd like to get a little bit more on Elric's take on because, like Shawn mentioned, he doesn't really, you know, watch footage unless he's in it. So like to see Elric's take on, like, how do you view watching footage, either
Uh, Sparring footage is not entertaining for me, but I do watch a lot of footage because I'm in communication with a lot of people, and then people ask me to watch their fights, and then that's an entirely different thing. And then that process is like, first thing I'll go is like, I'm going to write a couple things down here. What was your intentions going in? And then then I'll share like my notepad, like this is what I thought, and either it matches up or it doesn't. But it's like everybody has different perspectives on things, and I think if you want to get good, you need to video your fights, so you can see, because our it's always sometimes it's like shocking, like, man, I thought I sucked today. And then you watch it like, wow, it's a really cool fight. Or another time, like, I did so well today. And you watch it, I'm like, why does it look like shit when I'm watching it from the side? So it just tells me, like, oh, our perceptions are so subjective. But it's like an interesting thing because then you can see, like, oh, what is it about my experience that I felt like I was so good? It was this experience of flow or timing or whatever. And then there's the reality of like, oh, you better footwork this day, you're better timing that day. So, um, and if you're doing like a progression to get better, like over a couple of months, or building up to fight for something like a dog brother gathering, then I feel it's a very important thing. And I got that really when I was used to go to something called Gint's Club, which was a fight club in Silicon Valley, California. And Gint's actually ended up becoming Baltic Dog. But when I first went there, I was like, oh man, it was my first time fighting. They're wearing hockey gloves. I just wore gardening gloves so in case I needed to punch someone, my hand wouldn't get granted. But I was able to totally dominate. But us watching fights and then me freely giving all the information, hey, this is how I'm winning, and you're doing it's like when you give feedback like that, people can get much better. And then like, what do you call it? I honestly think with stick fighting, if you're just doing stick fighting, people can get a decently good, or I'd say dangerously good, way faster than people think in FMA. Like months only, not years. It's like months. If you're doing the right work during the week, doesn't take a long time to be a dangerous, scary stick fighter if you have the right mindset. Because sometimes people need to evolve their mindset too.
All right, my quick take on sparring footage. Yeah, I watch a lot of footage because of course my some of my students who are especially new to sparring, they're asking me questions and then like I have to tell them how they did and all that. And like especially when I started, I was doing some moves where I'm not sure why they worked or why they work. So looking back into it, I can see those nuances, those little emotions that you don't notice during the fight or during a sparring match, right? So again, like Elric mentioned, that your perception can be distorted, right? If you're in the fight compared to watching as third party or watching it later on camera. So it's very different, right? Memories are not, no, won't be exactly the same. It's like recalling it now compared to like a moment after the match, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of things that go into. Yes, Elric.
The other thing I would say is distinctions matter. Like going back to judo, it's like, okay, grips is a whole. There's a whole bunch of different distinctions around grips then there's off balancing, then how you enter, and then the shape of the throw. Those are the three things, and then the actual throw itself. Different FMA systems have different distinctions around footwork or where their pocket is, and it's like that's the other benefit of like having friends who are seniors in other systems that actually spar. You know, when you're close, just like they'll share like, oh wow, because some of what I've seen is any group that really spars and has done it for years, they have distinctions, and some of them overlap, or they might have entirely different bodies and distinctions that allow their people to become good in how they spar. And you know, that's something that exists in FMA that spars, but that's usually hidden between either cultural walls, paywalls, or organizational walls. Like you have to be with that organization or that system for a couple of years before they share that. But it's like it exists in a lot of those FMA systems where they have it. And then some systems are cool. It's like they give it to you day one because they want you to get good at sparring.
Yeah, and one more thing I'd like to bring up. Yeah, like our last sparring match, Elrik, was last Sunday. Yeah, we sparred with some wooden sabers. Yeah, so
Yeah,
when
single stick.
yeah, we sparred with those, and then yeah, once in a while you get me these questions about like what am I doing? You're saying like, oh, that's not actually doing anything, and I'm like, yeah, because you don't know my attention behind certain things. Like sometimes you can see that in the video and you can't see that in the match. Like when I'm in front of you, like when I was like purposely hitting your guard, right? You were asking me like, oh, that's actually just hitting my guard. That's not doing anything. And I told you like, oh, I'm actually doing that as a setup to something, right? So there's a lot of things that we can't see during the match that we can only see during the footage, or sometimes we can't see at all because we don't know the intention behind it. So I'd like to, in closing, like to get Shawn's thoughts on a bit more about sparring footage, about or reviews, or have your students asked you to take a look at their fights? To like, how would you give feedback to them?
Um, so at the throwdowns, I record every fight and then I post them. I've been doing that in the background while we've been talking, and we'll look at the fights and we'll slow them down so that you can actually see what's happening. My teacher gave me an exercise to do recently. Sent me a fencing match in the Destreza style and said, "What do you think about this?" And I looked at it and I was like, they're at a distance. And and uh, and then I got it slightly admonished, and it was like, "Can you try again? But this time, like, be specific." And so I had to slow it down to 25% before I started seeing like what the actual plays were. And but I don't think if you haven't got highly clarified strategies and plays and techniques, it's going to be really difficult to see what people are doing in the footage. Like, and especially if you're watching it at normal speed, it's going to be really difficult to see what's happening. Um, you know, I've always thought about like watching UFC fights and hearing the commentators going like talking about what could happen, and I'm sitting there going, from personal experience, you can have all of those ideas, but then you get in front of that person, that goes out the window because you're actually there feeling the timing, feeling the threat, like dealing with the pressure and seeing what you're throwing out there that's landing and not landing. And you might have an intention to do a certain technique, but halfway through it, you're like, no, I gotta bail. And or you hit them already, and it's like, well, I guess I don't need the more complex technique. So but if you've been working on techniques and you have footage of a sparring session that you've done like we do here, then the analysis is very possible. It's like, well, what were you trying for? Where was your head at in this event, and now we can watch it in slow motion and say, well, here's a place where it looks like you tried that, and this is how it turned out. And then you can even get closer to saying, like, well, why did it work or not work, when you have that slow motion footage. So yeah, I think that I always thought I was bad at it, being able to look at footage and ascertain what was going on there. I always thought I was bad at it, because you got all these guys that are like giving coaching advice based on, I watched a UFC fight last night, and it's like, I've got coaching advice for this professional fighter. And I'm sure that there are coaches out there, that are professional cornermen, and women who can stand there during the fight, call out signals to their fighter, see what's going on in real time. It's never been my strength, my something I considered a strength. But certainly, like with my students, looking at stuff when we have very concise intention, the analysis is very valuable. But I don't like to like claim like, I would have had them do this, because I wasn't in that fight. I didn't feel it. I'd have to be a lot closer to the training and the fighter in order to make those calls.
Yeah, it's different mindset and different. It's a different technique, basically observing a fight and watching it from third party. Being there live and or watching footage is completely different. Yeah. So yeah. Anything else you want to add, Elrik?
It, it's Shawn has a real point. It's like, it's one thing to give feedback on a fighter during an actual fight, and I'm like kind of school of thought. It's like, I would never do that. It's like, you should have done the time beforehand. Like my analysis really is like, progression of learning, and it's like, I think too often, specifically in FMA, people try to box in like, a guru or teacher is supposed to be all these things. Like, no, there's people who are good at developing skill. There's people who are good at developing people, in their first 3 months of sparring. There's other people, it's like, no, I want to get people to be like, a national champion in our list, because that's a specific skill for WCAF or point sparring. And then, or, getting people ready for their first tipo or throwdown or dogma together. Those are 3 different environments that you should prepare for differently. And it's like different instructors are going to have different abilities in each one of those. And that's something to know what you're good at, and know what you where you want to develop yourself from the coaching perspective.
All right. So, yeah, that's great insight from Elrik and Shawn here. So, I'd like to end by saying, last year I hosted Elrik for a seminar about, basically intro to some grappling, how to fall, grappling with a weapon and all that. So this year I'm going to have Shawn over, be coming to the Philippines from Canada. We still haven't decided on a date yet. We'll announce that as soon as we have all the details finalized. And yeah, excited for you guys to come join that seminar. That whatever, it's mainly going to be about sparring. So yeah, so that's why it's one reason why we're also having this call today, was to promote that and to basically see the landscape of sparring, understanding what it is, right? Even in Canada or in the Philippines, because around the world, people do it a little bit differently as well. Like we spoke about rule sets and everything. So yeah, we'll definitely do another call in the future, because we could. I'm really enjoying this call. Like I'm sure we can go on and on about it, but editing this is going to be a big pain. So yeah, we'll probably should end here, because I know we could just keep going for hours. So hopefully our viewers and hopefully Shawn and Elrik enjoyed our talk here. And yeah, big thank you to Shawn and Elrik for being on this call. All right.
Thank you.
Great to spend time with you guys.
All right.
Yeah.
So say goodbye here, and see them again in the next call. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Sparring time, can bring your friends with sticks and blades and empty hands. Let's learn and have some fun. It's sparring time.